Hi everyone, it's Laura here, and today I'm going to share with you a fun Christmas card that I created using stamps by my favorite things and alcohol inks for my sky background. This card is also part of Jenn Shurkus Get Cracking on Christmas, and I will let you know more about it during the video, but for now let's focus on how I created this card. I started by die cutting some watercolor cardstock using the rectangle die in the Mama Elephant Cloud 9 die set, and then I'm going to use this Stencil by my favorite things together with some white opaque matte texture paste by Ranger to create a textured tone-on-tone look on my background. The stencil is called Pine Tree Forest and I think it's absolutely gorgeous. I am securing it to the back of my watercolor panel using some washi tape, and then I'm going to use a craft knife to first soften up the paste a little bit and then apply it through the stencil. I'm making sure that I'm applying the paste over the entire surface and that I get a more or less homogeneous look throughout so that the paste looks smooth once I lift off the stencil. And if you wanted to, you could add some shimmer to this background using Glimmer Paste by Tonic Studios, but I wanted a more subtle effect on my card today, so this is why I'm using this texture paste over here. Once I'm done applying my paste, I'm going to smooth it out as best as I can, and then I'm going to lift off my stencil, and at this point I'm going to pause my card making and I'm going to wash the stencil as well as my craft knife under my sink, and I'm going to put the background aside to dry. In the meantime, I can go ahead and create the focal panel for my card. I have some Yupo paper here that I die cut with a rounded stitched rectangle die by my favorite things, and I'm going to pick a few of my alcohol inks by Ranger that you see I keep in this handy little tin, and I chose some shades of purples and pinks. I'm going to use the wet on wet technique, and I'm first adding my blending solution to the panel, and then I'm going to add a few drops of my alcohol inks, and I chose the colors Cool Perry, Pink Sherbet, and Amethyst. As you can see, I'm wearing a glove because I don't want my hands to get stained, and actually I would wear it on both hands normally, but I just couldn't find the other one for this video today. I'm also using this marker spritzer to move the inks around, and you can go ahead and add more inks or even more blending solution and keep using your marker spritzer, a straw if you prefer, or even just let them do their thing. And you can just continue doing this until you think you get a look that you like. And I say it this way because with alcohol inks, it's a little bit unpredictable, but I think this is the fun of this medium. Once I was satisfied with the look, I put everything aside to dry, and then I moved on and started working on my images. The stamp set that I'm using today is the Snow Buddies stamp set by my favorite things. I had bought this stamp set as soon as it came out because I think it's absolutely adorable, but I wasn't able to use it during the holiday season, which is really sad. But here is where Jenn Shurkus Get Cracking on Christmas comes to the rescue, if you will. This is a monthly event on Jenn's blog, and there you will find Christmas inspiration throughout the year. The event will take place once a month, and there will be prizes on Jenn's blog for those who join in, and there will be also other crafters like myself that will help spreading the word and sharing some inspiration. I personally think this is a great initiative. I love creating Christmas cards, and this kind of gives me, if you want, an excuse to make them throughout the year. I tend to buy a lot of Christmas stamps and I definitely not use them as much as I want to do, and some of them, like this one, I didn't use at all. So it's a great way to remove the sense of guilt for having bought stamps without using them, so that I can also buy them with a clearer conscience next year. Coming back to the card, I stamped my images on Nina Solar White 110 pounds cardstock using Spectrum Noir alcohol proof ink. This paper and this ink are my go-to now whenever I color with alcohol markers, because the paper is great, it allows for a great blending, and also the ink doesn't smear at all, no matter how many layers you put pretty much. And if you know me, you know that I like to add several layers with my alcohol markers in order to get that nice contrast. Everything will be linked in the description box down below, as well as on my blog, which is also listed down below if you're interested, so you can refer to that if you want to. There you will also find more pictures for this project, a pinnable picture for you if you want to save these to your Pinterest boards, and a supply list with picture links, so it's a little bit easier to figure out what's what. So once again, you will find a link to my blog in the description box down below if you want. Coming back to the card, I stamped my images on some Nina Solar White 110 pounds cardstock using alcohol-proof ink by Spectrum Noir in the color black. This paper and this ink are my favorite when it comes to coloring with my alcohol markers. I've been using the paper since I started card making and I love the blend you can achieve on it, and the ink instead I found out in the last, let's say, 6 to 8 months, and it has become my favorite ink. I never get any smearing when I use my alcohol markers, no matter how many layers I use, so you can see me using it a lot, and it's because I really like it. As I mentioned, I decided to use my alcohol markers for the coloring, and this one here are Illustrator markers by Spectrum Noir, another favorite supply of mine. I reach out for them in 90% of my cards, I guess. I am using a color palette that is almost complementary to the one that I have on my background. So I have some pinks and purples on my alcohol ink sky background, and for my images here I decided to use some blue greens and some yellow greens. This way I achieve some nice contrast between my background and my focal images, and I have to say that I really liked the way this card turned out. The composition was nice, the kind of mixed media background with the stenciled textured background and the alcohol ink sky I think worked pretty nicely together, and overall I had a lot of fun creating it, and I hope you like it too. As for the coloring, I am adding my shading as if the light comes from the top right of the screen, so that my darker shadows are on the left and lower portions of the images. I also added a few shadows on the top of her hat, just below the pom-pom, where there are some wrinkles in the hat itself, and I'm also paying attention to cast shadows. These are present whenever we have something standing in front of an object. So one example would be the arms, which are casting a shadow on her body, and also her hands are casting a shadow on the scarf. I am using 3 to 4 markers to do my blending depending on the area. Mostly I went for a 3 marker blending, but for these teal blue areas I used 4 markers to get that nice shading and depth in my shadows. And I just took my time, I colored these images and I just relaxed during the process. I'm coming in with a second layer of color, and I'm doing this on pretty much every area, sometimes even with a third, so that I get that nice sense of dimension which is created by having a good contrast between your highlights and your shadows. And once I'm done coloring her top, I can go ahead and start coloring the pom-pom and the tights. For those I used some cool gray markers. These are IG4 and IG2. And in order for the pom-pom to look nice and fluffy, rather than going in with a smooth blend, I'm adding some stippling motions with my markers to create some little dots. I have more dots and darker dots where I have my shadows, whereas I'm leaving the white areas almost completely white. I just have a couple of dots over there to create this nice sense of dimension. I used some warm browns for her braids, and I also colored the hair ties with my lighter yellow-green marker. That would be the CT1 marker. And then I moved on and colored the rest of the images using the same color palette that I used so far. I decided to leave all the coloring in this video for today. I do personally love watching people coloring images, and these ones are so cute, so I decided to leave it in. I sped up the second part a little bit more so that the video wouldn't be too long. But if you want to skip this, I'm going to write on screen the minute at which I'm going to go back to the card making. So make sure to jump over if you're not interested in the rest of the coloring. I'm going to leave you with some music now, and I'll come back when all the images are colored in. At this point, my images were colored and cut out, my alcohol ink background was dry, and I went ahead and created a huge side die cut using the same rounded rectangle die by My Favorite Things that I used for my alcohol ink background, and then I also used this stitched huge side border die, also by My Favorite Things, to create a hue out of this die cut. I used some watercolor cardstock by Crafter's Companion, which I really like because it's bright white and it's great for ink blending, and I'm going to add some shading to this hue by blending my Harmony ink by Spectrum Noir in the color Oasis using my Studio Katia blending brushes. As you can see, I'm using a very light hand and I'm just blending a little bit of ink on the edge of the hue side and leaving most of it white. At this point, my texture paste was also dry, so I could go ahead and assemble everything. I started by adhering the hue side to my alcohol ink sky background, and then I decided to use some foam tape. This is Scotch 3M foam tape to raise this panel over my background. I'm making sure that it's nice and centered, and then I can press down to secure it in place. I can then build my little scene starting from the fence and then adhering first the snowman and then the little girl and the dog. As you can see, both the fence and the snowman are hanging off of the focal panel a little bit because this creates some extra interest, and I'm also going to raise the girl with respect to the snowman because this creates more depth in the scene. We are basically exploiting perspective to make it look as if the girl is further down, so it's further away from us compared to the dog and the snowman. I added a little foam tape strip behind the fence to support it nicely, and then I used these snowflake dies to die cut some more white cardstock in order to decorate the card front even more. These dies are by My Favorite Things, but unfortunately I couldn't find them anywhere. I am not sure why. Maybe they're discontinued. This was one of the free with $60 Die-namics that I got when I placed an order on the MFT store, but I will link to a similar set of dies by Mama Elephant which were released this year in the description box down below in case you're interested. These reverse tweezers were very helpful in gluing everything down because it made handling the die cuts really easy. And then the last element that I need is my sentiment. I used this Falala script die by Fawn to die cut some Hint of Mint cardstock by Hefty Doodle, and in order to turn this into a sticker, I'm using some double-sided adhesive sheets by scrapbook.com. I am basically adhering my cardstock strip to one side of these adhesive sheets, and then I'm going to run it through my die cutting machine using my sentiment die. Once I'm done, I can remove everything, including the backing sheet of this die cut sentiment, and what I'm left with is basically a sticker that I can go ahead and adhere directly onto my card front. I do use liquid glue sometimes, but honestly, it's mostly because I forget to use these double-sided adhesive sheets. I find that this is the cleanest way to adhere a delicate sentiment die cut like this one. Also in this case, reverse tweezers proved themselves to be a great help, and then I could adhere the sentiment to my card front, and I decided to curve it a little bit for some extra interest. I trimmed off the excess and then I mounted everything on a top folding A2 card base that I obtained out of some Hefty Doodle heavyweight cardstock that I cut to 4 1/4 by 11 inches and scored at 5 1/2 inches. I'm going to adhere the card front to the card base using some double-sided tape, and then as a final touch I'm going to coat the sentiment using my glossy accents. This will dry clear and will add a glossy and slightly raised finish to my sentiment and will make it stand out from the background a little bit more. Before I go, I just wanted to remind you that the Get Cracking on Christmas event is running on Jenn Shurkus' blog, and I suggest you check it out for more card making inspiration, to join the fun, and to qualify to win prizes. And that's it for today. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and to let me know in the comment section down below. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe for more card making and paper crafting inspiration. Thank you all so much for stopping by and have a great day.